I tried, guys. I really did. I wanted this to be another epic 40-minute takedown like the Breath of the Wild video. But to do that, I need to complete Tears of the Kingdom first, and I just can't force myself to play anymore. This channel is a side hobby for me, and as someone who works full time, I don't have it in me to put dozens of hours into a game that I don't think is all that fun. But before you click away, I will explain why I think it's unfun in detail, but it won't be nearly as in-depth as other videos go because I only made it about a quarter of the way through the game before calling it quits. If you're looking for a video that critiques every facet of the game, I recommend this one by Feeble King. I think he summarizes a lot of the feelings I have while rounding out his perspective with late game examples. But finish watching this video first. This won't be a review, but more a personal account of why I, someone who put over 100 hours into Breath of the Wild, could not bear to play another second of Tears of the Kingdom after 45. With the disclaimers out of the way, let's get into it. My experience with Tears of the Kingdom began very similarly to my experience with Breath of the Wild. Infectious enthusiasm for the game spread online immediately after release from even the most critical voices in the gaming world, like IGN. 10 out of 10 reviews poured in, most of them citing technical performance as the game's only flaw, which, in retrospect, is nothing short of insane. So, with tempered expectations, I decided to see for myself and ventured into the world as I did my best to keep an open mind. After all, despite my criticisms of Breath of the Wild, I still said this about it. The tragedy of it all is I think it could have been the greatest game ever with just a few design changes. Were any of those design changes made? No. In fact, I think Tears of the Kingdom introduces just as many, if not more, problems than it solves. But before we get to that, let's stick with the format of the Breath of the Wild video and start with the positives. The tutorial in Tears of the Kingdom, like that of its predecessor, is well executed. It offers smooth introductions to the game's new mechanics while once again prodding the player's curiosity by placing them in an elevated location with vistas of distant landmarks. Although that curiosity is somewhat dampened by the fact that it's the same map as before, but more on that later. Enemy variety has been upgraded from completely embarrassing to just disappointing. I'm pretty sure there were more enemy types in one area of that other open world game that came out recently. I can't remember the name, but maybe it will come to me. The new suite of abilities is incredibly elastic and gives the player tons of ways to be creative, even if there's no incentive to be creative, but again, more on that later. I had a lot of fun using the new abilities in the tutorial specifically, mainly because there were precisely curated moments where I had to use available materials in combination with my new tools in order to progress, which is a scenario that became less and less frequent the further I got into the game. The mainline boss design has been improved on as well, although they didn't have to do much to clear the bar set by Breath of the Wild. If you guys can't tell, I'm having a hard time praising this game. Let's also quickly go over the unaddressed issues from Breath of the Wild. Weapon durability is still a huge problem. They tried to fix it by letting you duct tape your weapons together, making them so goofy and forgettable that you won't care when they break. But the issue of perpetually storing your best weapons for a later time still remains. Cooking is also still one of the most boring mechanics I've ever seen in a video game. I really don't know who gets excited about spending several minutes in a menu just to get the same meat skewer they've gotten 100 times before, but it sure as hell isn't me. The unchanged cooking and inventory mechanics also ensure that low difficulty returns as an issue from Breath of the Wild, since most fights are not a test of your combat ability, but rather a test of how much time you're willing to spend cooking before heading into battle. In terms of exploration, Tears of the Kingdom makes a clear effort to diversify what you can find in the open world. As you might remember, the biggest flaw in Breath of the Wild's exploration was that there was simply nothing interesting to find, with every point of interest leading to a shrine or Korok seed. In Tears of the Kingdom, there are caves, wells, and more minigame challenges sprinkled throughout the world. Of course, there is also the all-new content provided by the Depths and Sky Islands. So far so good, right? Well, the issue is, none of it is good. Once you have played one cave, you've played every cave. There is so little differentiation between them that finding one loses its mystique almost immediately. The wells seem to be watered-down caves with even less to do, but again, I'm working from a relatively small sample size. Maybe there are some caves and wells later on that I never found that would really knock my socks off, but I certainly didn't come across any in my playtime, and knowing what I know about Switch-era Zelda, Surprising the player with unexpected content is not its strong suit, which is a crippling weakness to have in an open world series. But these issues are minor compared to the ones that come with the Sky Islands and Depths, both of which manage to completely ruin exploration in different yet equally insane ways. There were two things that made Breath of the Wild's exploration exciting at a surface level: identifying landmarks and freedom of traversal. The ability to point out a landmark and go there, no questions asked, was enough to send the entire gaming community into a delirious frenzy when Breath of the Wild came out. Yet, in Tears of the Kingdom's most significant new content, both of these key elements are ignored. In the Sky Islands, you're able to pick out distant landmarks, but you can't get there freely because you have to rely on vehicles that break apart before you can get to where you want to go. In the Depths, you can traverse freely but can't pick out landmarks since the whole place is dark. Because of these dynamics, neither area was fun to explore, and I did not look forward to visiting them a single time as I played Tears. Another one of the few things I praised Breath of the Wild for was the cohesion of its world. It felt like one area flowed nicely into the next, and there were always new points of interest on the horizon. In Tears, however, the three layers of the map are just that: layers, awkwardly lasagnaed onto each other, to the point where early on I literally found myself forgetting the Depths and Sky Islands even existed because they were so unmemorable and unenjoyable. Worse, the overworld in Tears is, well, the same overworld from Breath of the Wild. In the last video, I said that predictability is the bane of exploration, and there is nothing more predictable than exploring a space that you have already been to. Exploring in Tears is plagued by a sense of familiarity, where I always had some vague idea of what was around the corner. Even if the areas have been remixed to some degree, the fact that I can look at a mountain or valley and go, "Oh yeah, I remember that," completely cheapens the feeling of exploring in Tears of the Kingdom, which is a massive flaw for a game that leans as heavily into exploration as Tears does. Even if there was a new map, simply diversifying what I am able to find as a player isn't enough. There also needs to be a worthwhile reward for seeking out that content, and this is something that Breath of the Wild struggled with mightily, and Tears followed suit. I mean, seriously, how am I supposed to be excited when opening chests in this game? The vast majority of the time, whatever's inside is underwhelming, disposable crap. Breath of the Wild's exploration made me ask myself why I should be exploring at all if everything leads to a shrine, but Tears of the Kingdom's exploration made me wonder what I should be looking forward to in this game in the first place. For many, the answer seems to be strongly tied to the idea of player expression and creativity through the new building system. This is one of the most universally praised elements of Tears of the Kingdom's design, but it shouldn't be. Yes, it is cool that Nintendo designed mechanics that have so many applications that players don't even find all of them in their playthrough. Hence the endless videos titled,
10 more mind-blowing things you didn't know you could do in Tears of the Kingdom. Number 1, did you know the Hinox is allergic to radishes?
I counter with this. If the game does not actively incentivize the player to explore those unique applications, who cares? Yes, you can factory farm eggs in Tears. Yes, you can build a lawnmower to cut grass more efficiently. Yes, you can build whatever this is.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
The game never presents you with situations that necessitate that level of creativity. If you are building insane contraptions simply because you can, then you are effectively making up for the game's design shortcomings by placing artificial constraints on yourself that don't exist under the game's framework, which is apparently something a lot of people have been doing. The comments on Feeble King's critique are filled with stories of people who found ways to enjoy the game by ignoring significant mechanics and systems, which is something players shouldn't have to do. Funneling players into a fun experience that makes use of all of the game's systems is at the core of what being a good game designer is. But let's talk more about building, because many of you are probably screaming at your screens telling me that building is inherently fun so the game doesn't need to give you a reason to do it. But it's painfully obvious that the building in Tears of the Kingdom is tedious and unsatisfying, to the point where my girlfriend, who beat and enjoyed Breath of the Wild, put the game down after the tutorial because she said the building felt like work to her. But don't take it from me or her, take it from the designers of the game, who literally implemented a shortcut so you can do less building. The introduction of the Autobuild mechanic marked the beginning of the end of my time with Tears of the Kingdom for a variety of reasons. First, it removes any motivation for the player to make use of their surroundings to succeed, which was an extremely compelling part of the tutorial. With Autobuild, instead of cleverly seeking out materials or using your own stock of Zonai devices strategically, you just slap down a hoverbike. Remember, this is the same series that barred you from boarding the Satori in Breath of the Wild because they wanted traversal to be slow. Why? Because it gives the player the opportunity to actually pay attention to their surroundings and get sidetracked, which is one of the most essential parts of an exploration-focused game. But no, in Tears of the Kingdom, you just slap down a hoverbike, reach a comfortable cruising altitude, and eat your mid-flight pretzels while you make your way to your destination free of pesky detours or distractions. To be clear, I'm not saying that leaning into player expression or creativity is bad. In fact, I think customization and the ability to develop a playstyle is one of the most fun things about gaming in general. But here's the key. In order to be rewarding, that player expression needs to result in the player achieving their goals more efficiently. Take Donkey's video on Tears, for example. I know the video is comedic, so I shouldn't take any of the things he does too seriously, but I actually think it highlights this point particularly well. Throughout the video, he builds a series of clever contraptions, and guess what? They all suck. Time after time, the punchline is that this thing he spent a lot of time building doesn't work well at all. This is seen most clearly when he plays the Strongman Bell challenge for literally the entire second half of the video, and struggles to get a high score despite building lots of cool-looking and creative things. Of course, he finally achieves his high score by strapping a bunch of rockets to the boulder, which is a funny, albeit completely uncreative solution. If you want an example of a game where being creative actually helps you achieve your goals more efficiently, rather than just being for novelty or laughs, look no further than the other game that defined the Switch's library, Super Mario Odyssey. You can beat the game without making use of the wide array of movement abilities the game provides you with, and the path forward is always clear even if all you know how to do is jump and throw your hat. But if you use movements like the long jump, dive, aerial hat throw, and triple jump, the game's platforming transforms completely, allowing you to not only approach challenges in your own way, but be rewarded for your creativity with faster progress. But in Tears, the most direct and coincidentally most boring solutions work just as well, if not better, than creative ones, giving you no motivation to be creative unless you artificially force yourself to do so. This trend of uncreative solutions being the best solutions carries over into shrines as well, which of course are a huge part of the Tears experience. Shrines are the obvious loophole in my argument about Autobuild, since the ability is disabled in them, but unfortunately shrines fail to make meaningful improvements to those of Breath of the Wild. Again, I'm working from a relatively small sample size, but the ones I played went like this. You walk in and see a bunch of materials in front of you, and then one of two things happens. You either instantly know what you're supposed to do and proceed with absolutely no trouble or thought, or you have no clue what you're supposed to do and just find a cheesy, unsatisfying way to solve the puzzle. In fact, I think calling them puzzles at all is generous, because pretty much every shrine just requires you to build a thing and then the rest is painfully simple. Or in the second case, you just combine the time rewind mechanic and the build mechanic and skip the challenge altogether. I will say I did enjoy the combat shrines where you have to use a specific mechanic or ability to deal damage to the enemies, but like the tests of strength in Breath of the Wild, I am reasonably certain those would start to overstay their welcome by the 50th one. These issues combine to make shrines in Tears feel generally unsatisfying. When solving a puzzle in a game, I get enjoyment from that player-to-developer connection where I discover the intended solution and know that it was the intended solution because it's the only one that works. In Tears, my reaction to solving most of the puzzles was more like, okay, I guess that works. This is especially bad for Tears of the Kingdom because unlike Breath of the Wild, Tears doubles down on puzzles and in my opinion, cements itself firmly as a puzzle game with combat rather than a combat game with puzzles. On the subject of combat, Tears also fails to build positively on what Breath of the Wild offered. Breath of the Wild's combat suffered from extremely low difficulty, especially as the player accumulated Divine Beast abilities. The Flurry Rush mechanic was simple but rewarding when executed properly, but given how that other open world game approached combat, what was it called? Young
Bazinga.
Sheldon? It's really gonna bother me. Anyway, the other game brought so much more to the table in terms of combat in an open world setting, so the bar was set high for Tears. And what did they do to spice up a combat system old enough to be in the first grade? Well, they made the abilities gained from beating main story bosses less powerful and less directly applicable to combat. Not bad. What else did they do? Well, not much. No new combat mechanics. None. Actually, wait, there is one major change I am forgetting. You can now build death machines that do combat for you. Oh, you can also fuse arrows with anything in your inventory, which sounds cool until you realize that you have to very slowly scroll through all of your items to find what you want, which is an absolute pace killer in a game already suffering from pacing issues. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, think about how many things in Tears take you out of the action. Want to use your Ascend ability? Watch a cutscene. Want to build? Spend 5 minutes aligning wheels. Want to fuse your arrows? Better get to scrolling. Defenders of the combat system use similar arguments to those that defend the building system, claiming that it is good simply because you can approach it creatively, leading to some genuinely cringeworthy sound bites like this one.
You guys want to know how to instantly tell if someone is boring or not? If they complain that the combat in this game is too simple or too similar to Breath of the Wild because the weapon types are the same. How do I know these people are boring? Because if they're complaining about it being a spam Y simulator, then that means that they're only using the melee weapons. They're just going in there and holding Y and complaining it's too simple. Of course you're not having fun.
This lack of innovation on the combat side of things leads back to my previous point about Tears being a puzzle game at its core. Think about how much of your time you are spending puzzle solving compared to engaging in combat. The main story dungeons, which are theoretically the best and most important content in the game, measure your progress in terms of how many puzzle terminals you have solved. The only way to increase your HP and stamina are to engage with shrines, which once again contain puzzles in the vast majority of them. The Temple of Time in the tutorial is not filled with enemies, but puzzles. To me, placing more of an emphasis on puzzles over combat was not a good design decision. You can reward the player with things that improve their combat abilities, but you cannot reward them with things that will make them a better puzzle solver without ruining that experience. This is why rewards and progression feel so much better in... Elden John? No, that's not it. Wait, what is that music? Do you guys hear that? What is going on?
You can cut grass with sharp weapons.
Alright, point made. So, if I'm not looking forward to the combat, puzzles, or exploration in Tears of the Kingdom, what am I looking forward to? Is it the story? Probably not. Is it the final fight with Ganondorf? Maybe, but it is absolutely not worth finding out, because Tears of the Kingdom fails to address Breath of the Wild's most pressing issues and introduces all new ones, especially in terms of pace and an overemphasis on player freedom rather than curating a satisfying experience regardless of approach. But my feelings on Tears are more complicated than
Bad game, give me views and don't forget to dislike and unsubscribe.
The thing is, I do think Tears of the Kingdom is a better game than Breath of the Wild, but only if you haven't played Breath of the Wild first. If someone came up to me on the street and said, hey, I just bought Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, but haven't played either one. Which one should I play first? I would probably recommend Tears. I think the slightly diversified enemy pool and open world offerings are enough to make it a more worthwhile and complete experience than its predecessor, but I just can't get over the fact that they used the same map. This isn't my anti-Zelda bias either. I would say the same thing if Elden Ring 2 was set in the Lands Between again. Venturing into the unknown is the essence of adventure, and when the unknown feels familiar, that sense of adventure and wonder is lost, and that is exactly what happened with Tears. Like Breath of the Wild, I can't help but feel like Tears of the Kingdom is yet another missed opportunity. If these new abilities were implemented in a brand new setting, I think this game may have been able to overcome Breath of the Wild's problems to deliver something great. And I realize a new open world is a big ask, but this game was in the oven for 6 years. It started development when we were making fun of the Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial. To me, that feels like a really long time ago. The depths in Sky Islands just don't feel like they were being carefully crafted for that amount of time, and these games are just making me appreciate the Zelda games of old that much more. Ultimately, I never found an answer to my question about what I should be looking forward to in Tears, and because of that, I saw no reason to continue playing. Alright, that about does it for Tears of the Kingdom. I'm sorry to those who were wanting another piece-by-piece dissection of the game, but as I said in the intro, I didn't have it in me. I'm looking to make more videos in the future on a variety of other subjects, so stay tuned for those. I think my next video might be on why team-based multiplayer games are so infuriating, but I don't know for sure. Open to suggestions in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.